Tonight we drift into a story as wide as the horizon and as ancient as humanity itself. A quiet, gentle history of how people first learned to live with the sea, to travel upon it, and eventually to explore the deepest, darkest waters of our planet. Settle in, soften your breathing, and let the slow rhythm of this tale carry you like a tide. For as long as humans have existed near coastlines, the sound of waves has shaped our understanding of the world, long before maps, before writing, before even the earliest cities. People listened to the ocean and felt a pull to understand what lay beyond its shimmering edge. Some of the earliest evidence of seafaring dates back tens of thousands of years, to small groups of ancient humans who crafted simple rafts and dug out canoes. These earliest voyagers lived in places like Indonesia and northern Australia, where archaeological clues suggest crossings as far back as 50,000 years ago. Even then, the ocean was not seen only as a barrier, but as a pathway, one that connected islands, food sources, and distant shores. Imagine those first journeys. Nights illuminated by moonlight reflecting on calm water, rafts drifting toward unseen lands, guided only by instinct, starlight, and a quiet courage. The hum of insects from shoreline forests fading as paddlers move farther from home. These were not grand expeditions in the way we might picture later voyages. They were small, fragile steps into a world that appeared endless. As centuries passed, coastal communities learned to read the sea the way others read the land. They watched the movement of tides, the migration of fish, and the seasonal winds. They built boats from hollowed logs, tied reeds into buoyant bundles, and used tree resin to waterproof their vessels. The tools were simple, but the knowledge behind them, passed down from generation to generation, was deep and intricate. In time, this growing understanding led to one of the most remarkable achievements in early human history: the settling of the vast Pacific. Long before Europeans crossed the Atlantic, long before the great empires formed, the ancestors of the Polynesian peoples began navigating across distances so great that they seemed almost impossible. Their voyages started more than 3,000 years ago, and they unfolded like a slow, calm blossoming across the ocean. To appreciate what they accomplished, picture the Pacific in its true scale. It is not just large, it is the largest feature on Earth, wider than all the continents combined. Scattered across it are thousands of islands, many isolated by hundreds or thousands of miles of open water. And yet, with no metal tools, no magnetic compass, and no written charts, Polynesian navigators learned to travel between these islands with extraordinary precision. They sailed using double-hulled canoes, sturdy and graceful, designed for long-distance voyages. Their knowledge came from the natural world, the rising and setting points of stars, the shape of swells, the patterns of clouds above invisible islands, and the behaviour of birds that flew out to sea in the morning and returned in the evening. All of these clues formed a quiet, powerful language, a language of the ocean itself. Some navigators memorized star paths, long sequences of stars that guided them across specific routes. Others used stick charts, delicate frameworks of curved sticks and shells that represented wave patterns and island positions. These charts were not carried on voyages. They were studied beforehand, committed to memory, and then left behind. Out at sea, the navigator relied entirely on what they had learned, keeping the crew steady and calm even as weeks passed without any sight of land. On a clear Pacific night, a navigator might lie flat on the deck of the canoe, feeling the motion of the waves through their back, letting the ocean's rhythm reveal direction. Generations refined these techniques until they became a masterful system of open ocean exploration, one of the most impressive in all of human history. By around 1,000 years ago, Polynesian voyagers had settled islands across an enormous triangle, stretching from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the southwest and Easter Island in the southeast. No other civilization at that time had navigated so far, so confidently, or so gracefully across the open sea. Their story is one of quiet brilliance, not the noise of conquest, but the peace of understanding. It shows how humans, simply by paying attention, could learn to cross distances that seemed endless. As the Pacific world continued its long tradition of voyaging, other ancient cultures were developing their own kinds of maritime knowledge. Along the calm waters of the Nile River, Egyptians built boats from papyrus reeds and later from wooden planks. By 2500 BCE, they were sailing into the Red Sea on expeditions to gather incense, timber, and minerals. Their ships were decorated with painted eyes meant to help guide them, and the gentle creaking of wooden hulls became a familiar sound along the desert's edge. Farther north, the Phoenicians emerged as the Mediterranean's great seafarers. Living along the coastline of what is now Lebanon, they built swift, narrow ships and established some of the earliest maritime trade networks. By around 1000 BCE, Phoenician sailors may have even circumnavigated Africa, a remarkable possibility recorded by ancient Greek writers. Whether or not every detail is true, what remains clear is that the Phoenicians understood the Mediterranean deeply, treating it as a vast interconnected landscape. The Greeks took a different approach, blending practical knowledge with early attempts at scientific understanding. The explorer Pytheas, in the 4th century BCE, sailed north from the Mediterranean to regions believed to be near the Arctic Circle. He described a strange, quiet sea, filled with a mixture of water, ice and mist, something he called the sea lung, perhaps an early description of drifting slush ice. Greek thinkers such as Eratosthenes began mapping the world with surprising accuracy, estimating the Earth's circumference and experimenting with ways to represent curved space on flat surfaces. The Romans, though not primarily explorers of the unknown, relied heavily on maritime trade. Their merchant ships connected distant provinces, leaving behind amphorae, clay jars once filled with wine or oil, on the sea floors of nearly every Mediterranean harbour. These scattered remnants tell a gentle story of everyday movement, of sailors carrying goods across calm seas beneath open skies, and as these cultures shaped the ancient maritime world, trade routes stretched far beyond Europe and the Mediterranean. Across the Indian Ocean, Arab and Indian sailors learned to time their voyages with the monsoons, steady seasonal winds that carried ships predictably east or west. These winds created a natural rhythm for travel, months of movement followed by months of waiting. Life in the great port cities of East Africa, Arabia and India grew around this rhythm, blending languages, traditions and ideas. All of these early traditions, Polynesian wayfinding, Egyptian expeditions, Phoenician trade, Greek geography, Roman shipping, and Indian Ocean monsoon sailing, form the gentle foundation of humanity's relationship with the sea. Each culture added its own quiet insight, expanding what was possible on water, and in the centuries that followed, new kinds of ships, tools, and knowledge would begin to reshape the world even more dramatically, leading toward an age when ocean exploration became global in scale. For now, let your mind drift like a slow-moving tide, imagining those first mariners watching the horizon line, feeling the wind shift, and trusting the sea to show them the way forward. As centuries rolled quietly forward, the knowledge carried by sailors across ancient waters began to spread, shift, and transform. Communities near the sea learned from one another through trade, stories, and the simple observation of how other ships moved across gentle or restless waves. Little by little, the world's coastlines became more connected, as if the ocean itself were guiding humanity into a more unified understanding of distance and discovery. Along the warm shores of the Indian Ocean, new navigational traditions blossomed in places touched by the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, Persia, and India. Sailors in these regions relied on a deep familiarity with the monsoon winds. Each year, the winds arrived like clockwork, first blowing from the southwest, then slowly reversing to carry ships back toward Arabia and Africa. This predictable cycle allowed mariners to travel thousands of miles with a steady, uplifting ease. For many of them, the ocean was a partner, not an adversary. ships moved between bustling port cities such as Kilwa, Sofala, Aden, Muscat, and Calicut. These ports were vibrant, calm in their own way, full of spices, woven cloth, carved wooden goods, and gentle conversations carried across balconies and courtyards. As merchants traded, sailors shared stories of distant places, describing coastlines fringed with palms, harbours dotted with lanterns, and other worlds waiting across the waves. Farther east, the maritime traditions of China were advancing in ways that would shape the next great wave of exploration. By the early 1400s, during the Ming dynasty, China constructed some of the largest wooden ships ever seen. Vast treasure ships with multiple decks, towering masts, and room for hundreds of crew members. These were the vessels of Zheng He, an admiral whose peaceful expeditions stretched from Southeast Asia to India, Arabia, and the east coast of Africa. Imagine standing aboard one of those ships as it left the harbour, the gentle sway of the deck beneath your feet, the soft drumming of sails filling with wind, and the sight of an entire fleet gliding out to sea in formation. Across calm waters, these ships carried porcelain, silk, copper coins, and gifts meant to establish friendly ties with far-off kingdoms. While Zheng He's voyages were not missions of conquest, they were grand expressions of curiosity, a desire to meet the broader world, guided by the sea's steady breath. At nearly the same time, thousands of miles to the northwest, a very different kind of maritime culture was thriving among the Vikings. Living along the rugged shores of Scandinavia, they mastered the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their longships were narrow and swift, built with overlapping planks that flexed with the waves. Powered by both sails and oars, these vessels could glide along coasts or surge across open seas with surprising grace. For the Vikings, exploration unfolded in stages. First to the Shetland and Faroe Islands, then onward to Iceland in the late 9th century. The voyages continued until, around the year 1000, they reached the rocky shores of Greenland, and shortly after the lands of North America, which they called Finland. Though their settlements there were brief, the journeys themselves reveal the quiet bravery of sailors who knew how to read every shift in wind and weather. While northern Europe and Asia refined their maritime traditions, the coast of East Africa was connected not only by the monsoon winds, but also by the blending of cultures. The Swahili coast, stretching from modern-day Somalia down to Mozambique, became home to beautiful stone towns, coral-built houses, and harbours where ships from Arabia, India, and even China anchored peacefully. Life here moved with the seasons, shaped by the gentle push and pull of the tide. Throughout this period of global movement, tools of navigation slowly improved. By the early Middle Ages, sailors in the Islamic world had refined the astrolabe, an instrument that allowed navigators to determine their latitude by measuring the angle between the horizon and the stars. This quiet innovation transformed the experience of being at sea. Instead of relying purely on intuition or coastlines, sailors could now trust the night sky to guide them, even when land was far out of sight. Centuries passed and each region carried forward its own silent expertise. But soon, all of these streams of knowledge, the Pacific traditions of wayfinding, the Mediterranean's early trade networks, the Indian Ocean's monsoon routes, Chinese ingenuity, Viking seamanship, and Arab astronomy, would converge into a new era. It began with small ships along the western coast of Europe, where mariners faced the vast Atlantic with cautious interest. In the 1400s, Portuguese sailors started pushing farther south along the coast of Africa. They learned from Arab navigators, borrowed ideas from medieval scholars, and experimented with new ship designs. Their caravels, with triangular sails and strong hulls, allowed them to travel farther than many European ships before them, and so a quiet, gradual shift began. People started to imagine a world in which the oceans were not edges, but pathways linking every continent. The sea, which had always surrounded humanity with its calm rhythm, was about to become the centre of global discovery. But before those famous voyages began, before the first Europeans rounded southern Africa or crossed the Atlantic, there was still a long period of patient learning. Coastal communities watched the birds, the tides, and the shifts in wind. They repaired their sails by lantern light, stored food in wooden barrels, and prepared their ships for journeys whose outcomes were never certain. In these moments of waiting, there must have been a peaceful hush across many harbours, the kind of quiet that settles just before dawn, when the water is still and the world feels suspended in place. It was in those hours that sailors whispered their hopes, checked their ropes, and took a final look at home before stepping aboard a vessel that would carry them into the unknown. And as we drift deeper into this story, we arrive at the threshold of a period that would reshape maps, change global connections, and reveal coastlines that had never been seen by foreign eyes. The ocean, vast and steady, was ready to open its arms to a new wave of explorers. But for now, let the timeless rhythm of these early voyages settle gently across your thoughts. Picture the glow of lanterns on wooden decks, the soft creak of hulls carried by small waves, and the feeling of a calm wind before a long journey begins. Soon, the age of global exploration will unfold, slowly, steadily, across the world's oceans. The world stood on the edge of a quiet transformation as the 1400s unfolded. Along the coasts of Europe, small harbours buzzed softly with preparation, though no one yet realised that the oceans were about to bind continents together in ways never seen before. Sailors repaired sails under pale morning light, shipwrights shaped timber into strong curved hulls, and navigators studied stars and compasses with growing confidence. Little by little, curiosity began to spill outward toward the open Atlantic. The Portuguese were among the first to embrace this slow expansion. Living along a rugged coastline where the ocean was part of daily life, they began to wonder what lay beyond familiar waters. Under the guidance of Prince Henry, often called Henry the Navigator, Portuguese mariners built new training centres, gathered scholarly writings from the Mediterranean world, and improved their ship designs. Their caravels, swift slender vessels with triangular sails, were perfectly suited for venturing into uncertain winds. At first their voyages hugged the coast of Africa. Each expedition pushed a little farther south, charting capes, rivers and stretches of shoreline that had not yet appeared on European maps. These journeys were not dramatic leaps into the unknown, but steady steps, made possible through patience and the gentle accumulation of knowledge. Sailors recorded the direction of prevailing winds, the currents that pulled at their hulls, and the landmarks that rose from the horizon as they rounded each new bend of coastline. As decades passed, the Portuguese reached regions where the winds shifted and swirled. They discovered that returning home required sailing far out into the Atlantic before turning back, a manoeuvre known as the volta do mar, the turn of the sea. At first this must have felt unsettling, leaving the safety of the coastline to venture into featureless blue. But the sailors soon learned the quiet patterns of the open ocean, trusting that the winds would guide them back north. By the late 1400s, they had rounded the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. The vastness of the Indian Ocean opened before them, a world of trade winds, monsoons, and ancient routes already well known to Arab and Indian navigators. When Vasco da Gama sailed to India in 1497, he did so by following the rhythms that others had understood for centuries. His voyage was not a sudden breakthrough, but the result of generations of gentle observation, steady improvement and shared knowledge carried across many cultures. Meanwhile, further north, other explorers were beginning to look westward. In 1492, Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic, believing he had reached islands near Asia. His ships, the Niña, the Pinta and the Santa Maria, drifted through calm seas and gentle trade winds, carried by atmospheric patterns that had steered ships across the tropics for thousands of years. Though Columbus was unaware of the continents that lay between Europe and Asia, his voyage revealed the existence of an entire hemisphere, rich with cultures that had built their own maritime traditions long before his arrival. Just a few decades later, another voyage would trace an even more ambitious arc across the planet. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan set out with a fleet of 5 ships, hoping to find a western route to the Spice Islands. The journey was long, slow, and filled with hardship, yet moments of deep calm must have surrounded the crew as they crossed silent stretches of ocean. Under starlit skies, they eventually sailed through the strait at the tip of South America that now bears Magellan's name. On the other side, they entered waters so peaceful that Magellan called them the Mar Pacifico, the Pacific Ocean. The name was not entirely accurate, of course. The Pacific can be vast and unforgiving, but in those first days the water may have shimmered like polished glass, touched only by a soft breeze. For months the ships drifted across this immense space, relying on the same universal cues that had long guided Polynesian navigators: stars, swells, and the quiet instinct of sailors who had spent their lives listening to the sea. Only one of Magellan's ships, the Victoria, eventually completed the first circumnavigation, in 1522, returning to Spain with a small, weary crew. The world, once imagined as a collection of scattered regions, had suddenly become recognizable as a single, continuous sphere. Oceans that had once separated societies now formed vast, navigable pathways between them. In the years that followed, ocean exploration grew not just in scale, but in depth. The maps of the world became fuller and more detailed. Coastlines that had once been drawn from speculation were sketched more accurately through direct observation. Mariners identified safe harbours, dangerous shoals, and the subtle movements of currents that shaped long-distance travel. Yet even as the age of exploration filled gaps in geographic knowledge, it relied on ancient foundations, traditions passed down quietly through generations: the open sea navigation of the Pacific, the monsoon wisdom of the Indian Ocean, the astronomy of Arab scholars, and the shipbuilding techniques of Europe, all intertwined to guide ships across the globe. For the sailors themselves, life at sea moved at a gentle, steady rhythm. Days blended into one another beneath wide open skies. The creak of ropes, the flap of sails, and the low hum of the wind became familiar companions. On calm nights, the ocean stretched out like an unbroken field of stars reflected in water. The world felt both endless and intimate at once. This slow, almost meditative existence continued as exploration shifted towards science, rather than trade or conquest. By the 1700s, a new kind of voyager began to shape maritime history, one driven not by profit, but by curiosity. These explorers wanted to measure coastlines accurately, observe wildlife, study unfamiliar cultures, and understand the planet's natural systems. Their ships carried not just sailors, but botanists, astronomers, artists, and natural philosophers. Among the most famous was James Cook, whose expeditions mapped large parts of the Pacific with remarkable precision. Cook's voyages, beginning in 1768, were marked by a quieter sense of purpose. The decks of his ships often served as floating laboratories, where scientists collected specimens, sketched new plants, and watched celestial events unfold above open water. The ocean, once viewed as a formidable barrier, had become a calm and patient teacher. These scientific journeys marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which humanity sought not just to cross the oceans, but to truly understand them. The sea remained mysterious, immense, and unpredictable, but it also revealed its patterns to those willing to move slowly, to observe and to listen. And as this gentle era of scientific exploration expanded, the world's understanding of the ocean deepened in ways that were both subtle and profound. Let your thoughts drift softly with the movements of those early research ships, their lanterns glowing against the night, their crews recording quiet notes about wind, water, and the curvature of distant horizons. Soon, we will enter the age when the ocean's hidden depths, its trenches, currents, and unseen landscapes, would begin to emerge for the very first time. As the 1700s progressed, the world's oceans began to feel less like distant boundaries and more like vast, slowly unfolding pages of a book. Each new voyage added quiet notes to the growing body of maritime knowledge. Coastal outlines became clearer, the positions of islands more certain, and the behaviour of winds and currents better understood. Yet beneath the surface, the sea remained a realm of complete mystery. Humanity had traced the edges of the oceans, but their depths were still hidden behind a curtain of darkness. Before the deep sea could be studied, explorers first needed to understand the surface world more fully. Ships like those commanded by James Cook ventured into regions that had never been accurately charted. His expeditions brought scientists, artists, and naturalists who observed the Pacific not as a route to wealth, but as a place filled with stories, cultures, and natural wonders. On board these vessels, life unfolded slowly. Days were marked by steady winds, the flapping of sails and the soft scratching of pens on parchment as crew members sketched coastlines or recorded the behaviour of seabirds. At night, lanterns glowed along the deck like small constellations reflecting off gentle swells. Often the crew gathered, quietly to watch the southern sky, noting the positions of unfamiliar stars that helped refine their calculations. One of the most influential observers on these early scientific voyages was Charles Darwin, who travelled aboard the HMS Beagle from 1831 to 1836. Although the Beagle's primary mission was to chart the coastlines of South America, Darwin's curiosity extended to everything he encountered, from coral reefs to volcanic islands. He studied barnacles, marine fossils, and the gradual rise and fall of land near the ocean's edge. The sea became both a laboratory and a source of inspiration, shaping ideas that would later transform science. During this period, sailors were gaining a better understanding of the ocean's surface features. They began measuring water temperatures, recording wind patterns, and mapping currents with increasing accuracy. The discovery of the Gulf Stream, a warm current flowing from the Gulf of Mexico toward Europe, hinted that the oceans were not passive bodies of water, but dynamic systems with their own hidden rhythms. Yet for all the progress, the deep ocean, everything below a few hundred meters, remained almost completely unknown. Without artificial light, advanced pressure-resistant materials, or steel cables, humans were limited to the uppermost layer of the sea. Even so, curiosity persisted. Mariners lowered weighted lines into the water to measure depth, sometimes finding bottom at a few hundred meters, other times never touching it at all. These early soundings began to suggest that the ocean floor was far more complex than anyone had imagined. As the 1800s continued, maritime technology improved. Ships became sturdier, navigational instruments more accurate, and scientific methods more systematic. This gradual refinement set the stage for one of the most important scientific expeditions in history, a journey that would change humanity's relationship with the ocean forever. In 1872, the British vessel HMS Challenger set sail with a mission unlike any before it, to study the oceans themselves. Its purpose was not to map new coastlines or establish trade routes, but to explore the structure, temperature, chemistry, and life of the deep sea. On board were scientists, naturalists, and technicians equipped with dredges, sampling nets, thermometers, and sounding equipment capable of reaching extraordinary depths. The Challenger spent nearly 4 years at sea, travelling more than 68,000 miles across the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. At each station, the crew lowered long ropes with weighted devices into the water, sometimes letting out thousands of meters of line. The ropes descended into darkness, passing through colder and colder layers until they eventually reached the ocean floor. Then slowly, they were hauled back up, bringing samples of mud, shells, and strange deep-sea creatures that had never been seen before. Imagine the stillness that surrounded the ship during those long pauses. The quiet creak of a wooden hull drifting in open water, the rhythmic splash of waves against the sides, and the subdued voices of scientists waiting patiently for the equipment to return. The samples they collected revealed a world of astonishing variety, organisms adapted to cold, pressure, and darkness. The idea that the deep sea was lifeless was quietly disproven. The Challenger expedition also discovered the deepest known point in the ocean at the time, a place now known as the Mariana Trench. Although they could not visit it themselves, their measurements suggested depth beyond 8,000 meters, far deeper than any mountain is tall. The realization that such immense valleys existed beneath the surface changed the way scientists viewed the Earth's structure. Perhaps even more important was the understanding of global ocean circulation. By measuring temperatures at various depths, the Challenger crew found that cold water flowed along the bottom of the oceans, forming a vast interconnected system that influenced climate and weather patterns around the world. This gentle but powerful movement of water became known as thermohaline circulation, a deep current that circulates slowly, almost imperceptibly, carrying heat and nutrients across the globe. The Challenger's findings filled more than 50 volumes of written reports and illustrations. These documents, painstakingly compiled, became the foundation of modern oceanography. For the first time, the ocean was not just a surface to cross. It was a complex layered environment with its own ecosystems, landscapes and internal forces. Throughout the late 1800s, other researchers continued to build on this momentum. Ships conducted deep-sea trawls, collected samples of plankton, and charted the outlines of underwater mountain ranges. The quiet, patient work of scientists revealed that the ocean floor was not flat, as once believed, but shaped by ridges, trenches, plateaus and volcanic peaks. Even though much remained hidden, humanity's understanding of the oceans was growing deeper and more textured. Coastlines had long been mapped, but now the unseen world was beginning to emerge, slowly, like shapes appearing beneath a clearing fog. Night after night, researchers aboard these ships watched bioluminescent plankton sparkle in their wake. They observed dolphins riding the bow waves, flying fish gliding above calm water, and the soft glow of the moon tracing a gentle path across the sea. These natural moments, quiet, unbroken, timeless, reminded them why they had come so far. Not for fame or conquest, but to understand. Humanity was now ready to peer even deeper into the sea, to descend below the reach of sunlight, into the pressures and shadows of a world that no one had yet truly entered. And soon, new technologies would make that possible, opening the doorway to the deep ocean for the first time in history. As the 19th century slipped quietly into the 20th, the oceans remained vast and largely unknown. Surface travel had become familiar, and scientific ships had brought back pieces of the deep, but no human had yet ventured far beneath the waves. The sea below a few hundred meters remained a silent, lightless mystery, a realm of crushing pressure, drifting currents, and life adapted to conditions that seemed impossible. Still, the curiosity that had guided humanity for thousands of years continued to grow. People began to imagine what it might be like to descend into those depths, to explore the underwater canyons and mountain ranges hidden beneath the waves. New inventions appeared, some small and experimental, others bold and ambitious, marking the beginning of true undersea exploration. The earliest submarines were simple, cramped vessels powered by hand-cranked mechanisms or small engines. They were built for military use, not scientific discovery, and their missions were often confined to shallow waters. But even these early designs revealed something profound. With the right tools, humans could move beneath the surface, slipping into a world where light faded into blue and sound carried in soft, muted echoes. By the early 1900s, engineers and explorers began seeking ways to go deeper. A handful of pioneers experimented with diving bells, heavy chambers lowered into the water on thick cables. Inside, air was trapped, allowing divers to breathe while the bell descended. The world outside the small window of glass appeared strange and distorted, as if time itself slowed beneath the weight of the sea. Despite their limitations, diving bells marked one of the first steps towards sustained underwater observation. As technology advanced, deeper exploration became possible. In 1930, American naturalist William Beebe and engineer Otis Barton created a spherical steel vessel known as the bathysphere. Suspended from a ship by a single cable, the bathysphere descended off the coast of Bermuda, carrying its occupants into areas no human had ever entered before. Inside the small metal sphere, Beebe and Barton peered through thick quartz windows as the world outside shifted from sunlight to shadow. At around 200 meters, the colors began to fade. At 400 meters, the sea turned black. Strange glowing creatures drifted past the windows, jellyfish, squid, and other organisms that produce their own light. By the time the bathysphere reached a depth of over 900 meters, it had shown humanity a tiny glimpse of the deep ocean's hidden life. Imagine the silence they must have felt inside the steel chamber, the faint hum of the cable above, the occasional creak of metal adjusting to pressure, and beyond that just darkness. Deep, endless, peaceful darkness. The bathysphere could not move on its own, and it could not communicate easily with the surface, but its descent became a symbol of what was possible when curiosity guided invention. In the years that followed, submarines grew more advanced, with stronger hulls and reliable engines. During World War II, sonar technology rapidly improved, allowing ships to map underwater objects using sound waves that travelled through water with surprising clarity. After the war, these tools were adapted for peaceful purposes, mapping sea floors, locating underwater mountains, and studying marine geology. As sonar swept across the oceans, researchers discovered the immense mid-ocean ridges, underwater mountain chains that encircle the planet like the seams on a baseball. These ridges, shaped by volcanic activity, hinted at forces deep within the Earth that pulled the ocean floor apart and created new crust. This discovery helped lead to the theory of plate tectonics, which transformed modern geology. But even with advanced sonar and submarines, reaching the deepest parts of the ocean remained an enormous challenge. At depth beyond 10,000 meters, the pressure is so intense that it can crush metal. Temperatures hover near freezing, and light has no meaning. Yet this world, so distant and inhospitable, continued to call explorers forward. One of the most remarkable breakthroughs came in 1960, when Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard and US Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh descended into the Mariana Trench inside a vessel called the Bathyscaphe Trieste. Unlike the earlier bathysphere, the Trieste was a self-propelled craft designed to withstand extreme pressures. Its sphere was made of thick steel, and its buoyancy tanks were filled with gasoline, which compressed less under pressure than water. The descent into the trench was long and slow. As the Trieste sank, the light faded completely, leaving nothing but darkness outside the small viewing window. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the gentle hiss of ballast being released and the soft crackle of the radio connection to the surface. At a depth of 10,911 meters, Piccard and Walsh reached the deepest seafloor known to humanity, a place of immense stillness, where particles drifted slowly across a landscape untouched by sunlight. They were reported seeing a flat plain of fine sediment and even glimpsed possible signs of life. A small, dark organism moving across the bottom, proving that even the greatest depths could support living creatures. Their journey marked a turning point. For the first time, humans had reached the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth. And though they stayed only briefly, their visit expanded our understanding of what was possible beneath the sea. In the decades after the Trieste's descent, new technologies emerged with gentle, steady progress. Scuba equipment allowed divers to explore shallow waters more freely. Underwater cameras captured images of coral reefs, sunken ships, and marine life in ways no one had ever seen before. Submersibles became more advanced, with robotic arms, powerful lights, and reinforced hulls that allowed them to reach depth thousands of meters below the surface. The ocean slowly, gracefully, was opening its doors. Scientists used these tools to study hydrothermal vents, underwater geysers discovered in the late 1970s along the mid-ocean ridges. These vents hosted entire ecosystems thriving without sunlight, fueled instead by chemical energy. Life in these dark habitats challenged traditional ideas about how organisms survive, revealing a world where warmth and nourishment came from the earth itself. Every new discovery emphasized how little humanity truly knew. Even with submersibles and robotic vehicles, more than 80% of the ocean remained unmapped, unexplored, and unseen. The surface, once considered vast and unknowable, had become familiar, but the deep still held secrets stretching endlessly in every direction. As the 20th century moved forward, a new era approached, one defined by collaboration between scientists, engineers, filmmakers, and explorers who sought not just to visit the ocean's depths, but to share them with the world. And soon, with satellite mapping, autonomous vehicles, and advanced submersibles, the ocean's deepest and darkest regions would become more accessible than ever, though still filled with mysteries waiting patiently in the quiet. Let the calm drift of this story settle your thoughts, like a gentle current guiding you farther into the blue. We will continue this journey into the modern age of ocean exploration, where technology reveals wonders that ancient mariners could never have imagined. As the 20th century unfolded, the ocean continued to reveal itself in quiet layers. What began with simple rafts thousands of years earlier had evolved into a world where humans could sink beneath the waves in steel spheres, map the seafloor with sound, and witness life in the deepest, coldest realms of the earth. Yet even with these advances, the sea retained its calm mystery, always offering more to discover. New technologies emerged not through sudden leaps, but through many small steps. Careful improvements in engineering, materials, and scientific technique. Submersibles became more reliable, their lights brighter, their windows stronger. Cameras adapted to withstand pressure, allowing images to be captured in places where the darkness had never before been disturbed by human presence. One of the most influential figures of this era was Jacques Cousteau, whose work in the mid-20th century helped bring the world beneath the waves into living rooms across the globe. Along with engineer Émile Gagnon, Cousteau helped develop the aqualung, the first widely practical system of self-contained underwater breathing, or SCUBA, equipment. This new tool allowed divers to move freely through shallow waters, observing coral reefs, shipwrecks, and marine creatures with calm, unhurried ease. Cousteau's films captured these gentle underwater moments, rays gliding like floating silk through beams of light, schools of fish shimmering in synchronized motion, and the slow pulse of jellyfish drifting with the current. For many viewers, it was the first time the underwater world felt accessible, peaceful, and deeply alive. His work inspired generations to care for the ocean, not only as a place of exploration, but as a fragile, interconnected ecosystem. As scuba expanded the horizon for divers, engineers worked on more ambitious machines capable of diving much deeper. A new class of vehicles, remotely operated vehicles or ROVs, appeared in the latter half of the century. These tethered robots, controlled from the surface through long cables, could withstand pressures far greater than any human body could endure. Equipped with robotic arms, lights, cameras, and specialized sensors, ROVs began exploring underwater cliffs, vents, shipwrecks, and trenches once far beyond reach. The use of ROVs coincided with dramatic advancements in global ocean mapping. Satellites orbiting high above Earth began to measure subtle variations in sea surface height, tiny ripples caused by underwater mountains, ridges, and trenches. These measurements helped create the first large-scale maps of the unseen world below, revealing landscapes that rivaled the highest peaks and deepest valleys on land. Meanwhile, oceanographers refined the tools used to study the sea's interior. Floating instruments known as Argo floats drifted through the upper layers of the ocean, periodically diving, rising and transmitting data on temperature, salinity, and currents. Their quiet journeys, spread across every major ocean, helped uncover the hidden patterns of Earth's climate system. Through these instruments, scientists began to understand how heat moved through the sea, how storms interacted with currents, and how the oceans breathed across seasons and decades. And while technology looked outward and downward, humans continued to descend directly into the deep. In 2012, filmmaker and explorer James Cameron piloted a specialized submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The descent was steep and solitary, taking him into a world of absolute darkness, where pressure levels were immense and silence was nearly complete. His vessel was shaped like a long vertical capsule, engineered to resist the crushing forces of the deep ocean. From the tiny window, the view was sparse, drifting particles, soft sediments, and the occasional shape moving across the bottom. But the journey itself marked another quiet moment in the history of exploration, proof that individuals, not just large scientific teams, could reach the deepest places on Earth. In the years that followed, new submersibles and autonomous underwater vehicles continued to push boundaries. Some glided silently through the water like mechanical fish, powered by changes in buoyancy. Others crawled along the seafloor on articulated legs, studying vents and mineral deposits. A few were designed for long missions, capable of travelling thousands of miles beneath the sea without ever surfacing. Modern exploration has also revealed shipwrecks, once lost to time, wooden vessels resting intact in cold, deep waters where decay slows to a whisper. These discoveries help historians understand ancient trade routes, naval battles and migration patterns, connecting past and present through stories preserved in silence. Through all these advancements, a steady truth remains. The ocean is still largely unexplored. Despite satellites, robots and deep-diving vessels, more than 80% of the seafloor has never been mapped in detail. Entire mountain ranges lie hidden beneath the waves. Creatures drift through eternal night that humanity has never seen. Currents swirl in slow, quiet cycles that shape Earth's climate in ways we are only beginning to understand. Even shallow waters harbour mysteries. New species are discovered each year among coral reefs, mangroves and estuaries. Subtle interactions between plants, animals and currents reveal complex worlds of balance and transformation. The ocean teaches patience. It opens itself slowly, offering glimpses rather than complete answers. It reminds us that exploration is not always loud or dramatic. Often it is the quiet study of movement, the gentle descent into darkness, the careful listening to patterns older than humanity itself. As we reach the modern era, our tools have grown more precise, but the sense of wonder remains unchanged. Whether aboard a wooden canoe, a steel-hulled research vessel, or a high-tech submersible, explorers continue to feel the same calm awe that touched the first seafarers thousands of years ago. And now, in this long story of exploration, we arrive at the present day, a time when the ocean calls to us not just as a frontier, but as a partner in understanding our planet's past, present and future. Soon, we will move gently into the final part of this journey, the continuing discoveries of the 21st century, the challenges facing the world's oceans, and the quiet promise of what lies ahead. For now, let your thoughts drift like a soft current, slow and steady, as we prepare to complete this calm exploration of the sea. In the 21st century, ocean exploration has entered a new, quiet chapter, one defined not by conquest or competition, but by collaboration, technology, and a growing sense of responsibility. Humanity now understands that the sea is not simply a place to explore, but a living system that shapes climate, supports countless species, and connects every corner of the world. Much of modern ocean research takes place through a network of scientific teams working together across countries and continents. Research vessels glide through calm water, equipped with tools that would have seemed like gentle magic to explorers of the past. Ocean gliders cruise beneath the surface in slow, steady arcs, measuring temperature and salinity. Drifting buoys send quiet pulses of data up to satellites. Deep-diving robots extend articulated arms to collect samples from places no human may ever touch. These machines are precise, but they move with a kind of peaceful intention, following the rhythms of the sea rather than forcing themselves through it. One of the most ambitious modern efforts is the goal of mapping the entire seafloor in high resolution. The project, known as Seabed 2030, aims to create a complete map of the ocean floor by the year 2030, a task that requires countless soundings, satellite observations, and autonomous missions. Each new contour added to these maps reveals something that was once hidden: a ridge rising from the depths, a canyon carved by ancient currents, or a trench dropping deeper than expected. In many ways, these discoveries echo the gentle curiosity of the earlier seafarers who once looked across unknown waters and wondered what lay beyond the horizon. Though our tools are more advanced, the feeling is much the same: a quiet sense of wonder, an appreciation for the vastness around us, and a recognition that the sea will always hold more than we can ever fully grasp. Modern exploration has also turned inward, focusing on the delicate ecosystems that thrive beneath the waves. Coral reefs, those bright underwater forests, are studied with care as scientists work to understand how they grow, adapt, and sometimes struggle in warming seas. Kelp forests sway like underwater meadows, providing shelter for fish and marine mammals. In the deep, new species continue to emerge under the glow of submersible lights, creatures with slow, graceful movements adapted to perpetual night. Each of these discoveries reminds us of the ocean's resilience, but also of its fragility. Climate change, pollution, overfishing, and habitat loss pose significant challenges. And yet, in the face of those challenges, people around the world are working together to protect marine environments. Coastal communities restore mangroves that shield shorelines from storms. Scientists cultivate coral fragments to rebuild damaged reefs. Conservation groups create protected areas where marine life can recover in peace. These efforts reflect a deeper shift in humanity's relationship with the ocean, where once exploration meant pushing outward, now it often means looking inward, understanding how to care for the sea as it has long cared for us. And still, the ocean remains full of mysteries. Even with all our technology, the vast majority of this world beneath the waves is untouched by human presence. Entire ecosystems lie undiscovered. The deep trenches whisper ancient stories. The slow, planet-spanning currents continue to circulate heat and nutrients in patterns older than civilization. The ocean keeps its secrets patiently, revealing them only when humanity is ready to see. As we drift toward the end of this long, gentle journey, it's worth pausing to imagine the many eras that brought us here. The first humans crafting simple rafts along ancient shores, Polynesian navigators lying on the decks of canoes, reading the stars by feel and memory, Egyptian and Phoenician sailors tracing warm coastlines, Greek geographers sketching early maps, Viking longships cutting across the cold North Atlantic, Portuguese caravels rounding headlands into open ocean, scientific vessels drifting under southern skies, submersibles sinking into darkness where no sunlight ever falls. Each era added its own quiet thread to the tapestry of ocean exploration. And now, in this moment, we are part of that story as well. We stand at the edge of an ocean that is still unfolding, still revealing its wonders, still reminding us to move slowly, to observe carefully, and to appreciate the stillness as much as the discovery. When you listen to the sea, whether from a distant coastline, a quiet harbour, or only in the imagination, you can feel the same calm that guided countless generations before us. The sea continues to breathe in long, steady rhythms, a reminder of how ancient and gentle this world can be. As this story comes to a close, imagine the soft rise and fall of the waves at night. Picture a research vessel drifting under a sky filled with stars. Picture a small light on the deck, flickering softly as the ocean murmurs below. The world is vast, and yet it feels peaceful, connected, and timeless. In this quiet, endless expanse, the story of exploration continues, slow, patient and full of wonder. And with each passing day, the ocean invites us to keep listening. Let your thoughts settle like sand gently drifting to the seafloor. Let the calm of the water linger with you as you rest.